Hello, everybody, and welcome. We're back. It's The View from the Top, and it is great to be here today. It's been an amazing week. This time last week when we were on air, there was the inauguration going on. We've now had the first week of the new presidency. Lots have happened, and we're going to be talking about that in some detail in our immigration roundup coming up in a minute. But you know how it works. We've been doing this for a long enough time. Give us a shout out. Tell us who's out there. We want to hear. I'm already seeing people coming in. So hi to Elisa from Bangalore, to Mena, to Emily Licht, from Michael Quigley out in Silicon Valley, from Mary Corrales, from Drew from the Bay Area. Oh, I mean, people are coming in. So this is brilliant. The numbers are really bigging themselves up because we've got a great show for you today. I'm just delighted. I'm honored. It's such a great honor that we've got Ray Kirby as our special guest. Ray is, just a legend of our industry. The companies that Ray has worked with, he's been with Carter's, he's been with Grable, he's within Microsoft, with Amazon, with Nordstrom, and now with Twitter. These are all iconic companies that Ray has been with, and we're going to be getting into a bit about Ray's backstory and some of the issues that that are important at Twitter, and issues that are important to him personally, both geographically and in terms of areas of interest. So we're going to be getting into that. So, and people are hitting those like buttons, those heart buttons, the applause. Let's hear that from everybody. Come and tell us who's out there. One of the nice things about this show is it's fun. It's creating a community. I think people really get a good feel for what's going in our industry from listening in. But not only that, but you also get educated. And I'm delighted to say that we are approved for, well, pretty much any credit you want. You've got your GMS credits, your CRP credits, your HRCI credits, and your SHRM credits. And at the end of the show, we will be releasing those numbers so that you can claim your GMS credits, your CRP credits. I should say that, obviously GMS and CRP, those credits are given by ERC, and a big shout out to Lynn Shotwell and the team at ERC for giving us those credits. But also a big shout out to Rocket Mortgage, previously known as Quicken Loans, who very kindly have organised for us to get the HRCI and the SHRM credits. So Lisa Fontana and all the team at Rocket Mortgage, we really appreciate the help that you give us. In terms of what's coming up, as I mentioned last week on the show, we're now rotating the show. So we're doing The View from the Top is our strategy show, and we're doing that every other week. And then the weeks in between, we're doing a technology show called Benevo Bites. And next week, our technology show is on, actually, in a way, it could have been on both shows. It's a really fascinating subject, and one that I'm hearing more and more about, which is India domestic transfers. I think everybody knows about international transfers. Everybody knows about US domestic transfers, but India domestic transfers is becoming a huge issue. And we've got some fabulous technology that we're going to talk through, and we're going to talk, how India domestic transfers are happening in practice. And then the week after that, The View from the Top is back. And I'm delighted to say we've got Eric Tate, who is a real veteran at Ayres. I think he's been with Ayres for 27 years. So Eric is going to be with us on the 10th of February. So that's the next couple of weeks. But what we really ought to do now is, I mentioned immigration. I mentioned the fact that we've had a new presidency there for one whole week, and a week is a long time in politics, as they say. So without further ado, why don't we start talking about immigration? Hi, Julia.
Hi, Brian.
And we've got I mean, the numbers are going crazy here. I think we've got nearly 200 people now online listening to us. So tell me, I can see you're in a hotel room looking at that backdrop, and you're still out in Dubai, are you?
Yes. Going to be here for a few weeks, I think.
Oh, really? Right. Okay. Well, that's wonderful. It must be nice being someone that's not in lockdown.
Yes. Well, I'm sort of working on a project in this region.
Okay. Well, we won't go into that because I'm sure it's confidential, what you're doing out there, but I'm sure it's all very exciting. But what has been really exciting this week is we've had 1 week of a new presidency and a raft of executive orders. So
yes.
Do you want to be up to date on what's going on in US immigration in the last, well, literally the last 7 days today?
Yes. So first of all, I just want to say I'm not a US attorney. I'm privileged to work with lots, and I wanted to thank Bo Cooper, who heads our Washington office, and also Charlotte Slocum, who heads our consular practice in London. And I can see there's some fantastic US attorneys like Sarah Vivette who've logged in. So I'm just going to be looking at this from a global mobility leader's perspective, looking across to the US and saying, what's happening, what's happened in the last week, what should we all be aware of? So as Brian said, Joe Biden entered the White House, 46th US president, and he's set out a broad-based policy priorities to tackle the economic impacts of the pandemic. And he's articulated a goal to pursue bipartisan solutions on matters including immigration. But as everyone knows, it's a very important fact to know, he has a very slim majority in the Senate, 50 to 51, with the tie-breaking vote of the Vice President, Kamala Harris. And therefore, there's limits to what Biden can accomplish through legislation. And because you need 60 votes to overcome a legislative filibuster and therefore to move forward to consideration of substantive legislation. So there is this big hurdle to legislation, but nevertheless, the Biden administration have gone straight out the gates, and they've signaled their intention to try and implement some really serious immigration reform. And they've proposed a bill which is entitled the US Citizenship Act 2021. As of last week, no one had seen the details of the bill, but the proposals are very ambitious, and they provide a pathway to permanent residence and citizenship to several classes of vulnerable migrants, including, for example, those covered by DACA, which, as you all know, are formerly children who entered the UK unlawfully, and many employers have DACA employees. And he is providing in this bill a pathway for them and other people with a temporary protected status and undocumented migrants. Also, the bill provides for clearing up the employment-based visa backlogs and also eliminating these per-country visa caps. And it's also anticipated that spouses and children of those working in the STEM fields would be exempted from quotas. And there's a proposal in the bill that H4 visa holders,
that's big news for us, isn't it?
Yes. The H4 visa holders, they're the spouses of H1Bs. They would have their right to employment authorization codified. And I see that Helen Frew has joined us today, and she is the Executive Director of Permits. I sit on the board of Permits. We're passionately behind getting dependents the automatic right to work. And yesterday there was an announcement that Trump's proposal to rescind work authorization for certain H4 spouses has been withdrawn by the Biden administration. So that's good news.
Can I ask you a question, Julia? Actually, it's Gabby Batchuber who said, I understand the large bill may actually be broken up into smaller bills and initiatives. Have others seen this news?
Yeah, I think the thing is that I think you're right, Gabby, because it's in a way it's a big statement. It's a big statement, and you can see the direction of travel. But for the reasons that I've said at the beginning, it's going to be hard to sort of push such a big act through. And I think that is probably the way it will go. Moving on to the travel ban, Biden has revoked the Muslim ban, and that was his first executive action. And that's the ban that primarily affected Muslim majority in African countries. And then what happened is that one of President Trump's last presidential proclamations was to lift the regional COVID travel bans, and they would have been lifted from yesterday. So the Biden administration reimposed them and actually put some extra things in there. So now, and this is very important if you're wanting to move people to the US. So the ban is in place now for people coming from Brazil, Europe, the Schengen countries, Ireland, the UK, and now South Africa. And the important thing, anyone who's been in those countries for 14 days is subject to the ban unless they come in one of the exemptions. And it also applies to people who've just transited through those countries. So if you've done a transit through those countries. And now there's an additional requirement that if you're over the age of 2, you've got to take a COVID test. The other thing to say, over the age of 2, yes. Oh, okay. I found it was the most painful thing in the world, but I know I'm the biggest baby ever, but I couldn't imagine having to do it if I was 2 or 3. Anyway, so March the 31st is when Trump's HLJ immigrant visa proclamations expire, and we spent a long time last year talking about those major proclamations, and it's likely we'll get decisions on these as early as the end of this week. And then I finally just want to say something about the impact of the Biden administration on key Trump era immigration rules. And I just want to talk about 3, and these are really, really important for employers. So the first is the H-1B cap allocation rule. And this rule that Trump wanted to enforce was saying that you should pick the highest paid people first when you look at the cap allocation. And this would have a huge impact on the H-1B lottery, which kicks off in the spring. But what's happened is that the White House Chief of Staff issued a regulatory freeze, and it's likely that this will be postponed till the 21st of March. And there's a strong basis to believe that the DHS has power to postpone it further, because there's a strong argument that this can be subject to, that really it's not illegal, because there's a significant question over the lawfulness of it. Because it's in statute, it provides first come, first served. But the thing to be aware of, that Biden administration likes the concept of using wages as an indicator of non-immigrant workers' value to the economy. So again, the future of this is something that we'll be talking about over the next few weeks. The DOL prevailing wage, which is the second important thing, which is increasing wage requirements for affected temporary and permanent employees, is in the same position, a regulatory freeze. And then the third Trump proposal, which would have had a huge impact on defining employee-employee relationships and would really affect where employers put an employee on another site. Very, very luckily, the Trump administration ran out of time, and they never published it before inauguration. And there's no indication that Biden will sort of revive it. And then my last point is that 29th of January, this week, is Immigration Day, and we think there'll be a huge number of other developments. So all in all, very active first week, a lot happening, and much more than we anticipated a few weeks ago.
Okay, and Julia, you will be back with us next week when we do Benevo Bites, and no doubt we'll be having a bit more update if there's been more developments then. So thank you so much. I mean, you've got, in about 7 or 8 minutes, you've jammed in so much information. That's fabulous.
Can I just say one thing? On Benevo Bites last week and the week before, I mentioned that there was a bit of consternation with employers because the new immigration rules in the UK came into effect, and people were very excited because the skilled worker category, you don't have to advertise that position anymore. And then the policy was inconsistent. I've actually joined a call with the Home Office a couple of hours ago, and they said that's not their intention and they will change the guidance. And I just wanted to say that because it was worrying so many employers. So don't worry about that. The guidance will be changed. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify that for everyone.
That's great news. But sadly, we're going to have to lose you for a while, and we're going to bring Pat on to talk us through tax. So we're going to go from immigration to tax now.
Lovely.
Pat, good to see you. Is it cold in Boston today? I think you're on mute, Pat.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yes, okay, we've got him back.
Well, I am here in snowy Boston. We got a few.
So you're going to do tax just by muting it. I don't know what your sign language is like. But...
Sign language, yes. Well, certainly I'm no good at that, so I think I'll just keep talking.
Okay, so you're taking us to Italy first, I believe.
Yes, the first stop. Yes, first stop is to Italy, and one of the things I wanted to mention is that they continue to tinker with the expat concession that's available in Italy. You may remember or familiar with the Dutch 30% ruling. You know how that one works?
Yeah.
You can exclude up to 30% of your compensation if you qualify. And Italy put in a similar concession, and not to be outdone, they offered a 50% concession. That happened back in 2017. A year ago in 2020, they enhanced it further. They said, well, let's make it 70% you can exclude from your income that's tax-free. So that's the way it's been for about a year. And then they've just issued some new regulations, which I'll cover in a moment. But I did want to at least explain to you how this expat ruling works. It's intended that the people are moving to Italy to settle and to work on a permanent basis. That's the concept, at least. And so you have to be committing to residing in Italy for at least 2 years. You could not have been resident in Italy the 2 previous years to the move. And assuming you meet those requirements, 70% of your income can be excluded, which is a pretty sweet deal if you think about it. And just to make it even better, in certain locations and certain professions, the exclusion is 90%. So if you agree to settle in certain southern regions of Italy, Sicily, Sardinia, and others, then you can qualify for the 90% exclusion. Or if you are in a academic or scientific industry or profession, you might also qualify for that 90%. So let's think about this. Top rate in Italy is 45%. If you qualify for the 70% exclusion, your effective top rate goes to 13%. If you're so lucky enough to have a 90% exclusion, the 45% becomes 5% tax on your income.
Who'd have thought Italy is a tax haven?
Well, there you go. But clearly, they're trying to get people to move to Italy and get settled there. So the one recent development that just happened this past month, the tax authorities there have qualified that remote workers can also qualify for this exclusion, which means you don't need to work for a resident Italian employer. You can work for a non-resident, non-Italian company and qualify for the exclusion. So that's the recent development. And again, this kind of goes with some of the other things that
everybody's going for this. I tell you, Pat, I'm just looking at the comments coming in. Does this include work from home? Is it free in the Vatican? Pizza, pasta, limoncello, and tax breaks? Grazie. Who's moving to Sardinia? Oh, I love Sardinia. Who's moving to Sardinia in the sunshine?
I know. Doesn't that sound great?
So everybody is going for, I mean, everyone's going for a transfer. What have we got here? Arrivederci, sign me up. Request.
Yeah, so there are some double-edged sword to this, though, because if
don't give us bad news. We're just enjoying.
If you're a remote worker working for a non-Italian company, what potentially could happen to the employer? They could trigger permanent establishment in Italy, thereby drawing corporate tax problems to the arrangement. So obviously you'll need to look at, if you're going to allow your worker to work remotely from Italy, what does it mean to you as the company? You'll have to consider what is the implications for that. And, they're going full bore on trying to get this thing in place. But let's not forget that Italy still has a state of emergency because of COVID, and that's scheduled to expire at the end of April, but who knows how long that'll take, But so anyway, that's the news from Italy. Moving on.
Yeah. Which is a shame, actually, because I think we're all just, unless you've got better news, because I think we're all loving Italy at the moment. But
yeah, exactly. I would certainly like to visit, put it on my bucket list. So the other thing I wanted to cover is some major tax reform that's happening in the Czech Republic, also known as Czechia, apparently. And they're switching their tax system for individuals in a major way. And I think in part because it was such an unusual system prior. The way it worked for employees prior to 2021 is that you were taxed not only in the wages that you received, but you were taxed on the concept of super gross salary, which was a tax term, super gross salary. It meant that you also had to pay tax on the Social Security contributions that your employer made to the schemes, which is very unusual. That's not something you typically see in other tax systems, is having to pay personal income tax on the employer contributions to social. And it wasn't small. It's almost 25% employer contributions to these schemes. So it was, in effect, the employee making those contributions that the employer was making from their own after-tax income in a way. So they got rid of this rule. They made some major reforms. So it's no longer super gross salary. They're also eliminating a thing called the solidarity surcharge, which is just basically an extra tax. And they're putting in a progressive tax rate schedule. So there'll be a 15% rate. There'll also be a 23% rate for higher incomes. And I think probably what we'll end up with net is that there'll be some tax savings for lower incomes and potentially some tax increases for higher incomes. So we here at AirInc are right now in the process of getting those changes implemented. But I think they're joining what you would typically see with most tax systems across the world.
Okay, so thanks, Pat. That's a fabulous update. I think the thing about Italy has just wowed everybody. Czech, maybe not quite so much so, but everybody is packing their bags even as we speak. But I'm hoping they're staying, because we're going to bring Ray Kirby on now. So, guys in the audience, you know how this works. When the special guest comes on, you applaud, you clap, you stomp, you shout. Well, let's do the same in our own LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube way. Hit those like buttons, hit those applause buttons, hit the heart buttons. Very, very special character, much loved, of course, voted one of the top 100 global mobility professionals in the world. And so it's time to say goodbye to Pat, and we bring on our very, very, very special guest, the one and only Ray Kirby. Ray, you are loved. I don't know if you're seeing the comments coming up here on the side of the screen. It is going mad. We've got well over 300 people now waiting to hear your every word. So no pressure, no pressure. When the applauses and the hearts and the likes, I mean, it's just gone crazy, Ray. You are clearly one liked guy. So tell me, let's get to know today's special guest. First of all, where are you today, Ray?
Yeah, good morning. I'm in Seattle, Washington.
Cool. which is not where Twitter are based, of course. So you're sort of
Nope.
working from. We're going to get into working from home. Actually, we're going to get into that in a moment. But let's just, one question I always like to ask people is, how did you get into this industry? I don't, I used to say that nobody actually sort of at home thought, I want to be a global mobility specialist. That wasn't like sort of the career choice, although I have had some people on the show in the past who are second generation global mobility specialists, people like Mike Piker and Siobhan Cummins, whose parents were in the industry and sort of moved into it. But Ray, how did you get into mobility? Yeah,
great question. If you had asked, 18-year-old Ray what I was going to be when I grew up, I would have told you an attorney. I always thought that I would go to law school and that I would be just like Elle Woods from Legally Blonde, practicing law. The world had other plans for me. And after graduating from my master's degree in public policy and public administration, I had actually moved to South Korea.
But you grew up in Chicago, yeah?
Yeah, grew up in Chicago.
Okay,
yep.
Yeah.
Born and raised in the cornfields, meat and potato, corn fed.
Okay, so you're a Midwestern lad, but somehow you ended up in South Korea, which is not where, it's not that close to Chicago. So how did you end up there? Yeah,
it was definitely not close to Chicago. And, if my mom was watching today, she would probably tell you that when they dropped me off at the airport, they thought I might never return. They weren't really sure what to expect. But 2007 is when I graduated with my master's. It was the start of the recession here in the US. And so there weren't a lot of job opportunities for those who had a master's degree with zero work experience. And so I had a friend who was living in Seoul who had shared with me that he was living a great life, teaching English at a foreign school, and that that these schools pay for your housing and for your flights and give you a pretty modest salary that would allow you to travel all throughout Asia. Travel being something that I've been passionate about since a young age. I decided why not, and I hopped on a plane thinking I was going to go for a year and stayed for over 3 years. It was while I was in South Korea that I started to meet other expats and learned that there was this, large expat community, not only in Seoul, but throughout the world. I had an opportunity with the company that I was working at in Seoul to move to Seattle. And once I was here in Seattle, I actually met a mutual friend a mutual friend connected me to Kate Tarnowski. Many of you might know her from Starbucks, who at the time was working for Cardis, managing Cardis's language training program specifically for Microsoft. And so that's how I initially got started in the industry. Kate and I connected. I told her about my time teaching English, and she offered me an opportunity to do some language training for Microsoft employees.
Oh, I see. So effectively you got in through the DSP sort of side of being a language trainer.
Yep, that was my very first job for Cardis was doing language training, and I was going to meet Microsoft employees at their offices or at their homes, delivering English training to them.
Okay, so you got into it. So you got into it through Cardis, and then you went to Microsoft.
So I worked for Cardis on site at Microsoft, and so we supported the Microsoft program. And so I didn't work for Microsoft; I worked for Cardis, and then I worked for Grable. And what was exciting about the opportunity with Grable is that I was one of the very first on-sites that they had put on-site at a client. It was around the time where on-site positions were becoming popular, and so I was able to kind of create that position and build out what an on-site program could look like, which was exciting from a career perspective. It gave me the opportunity also to go on an assignment to Luxembourg, where I was able to show how the on-site model could be replicated in other regions. And then that eventually led me over to the corporate side when I joined Amazon.
Okay. Actually, here's got a question that's come in, Ray. So you said you were open to any questions, and here's from Lindsay Hairstiff. Big shout out to Lindsay. She says, mobility professionals have taken a hit this year. Oh, tell me about it. How do you see the industry recovering, please?
Yeah, that's a great question. I definitely think that while many companies are going to embrace remote work, that there will always be a need for the mobility professionals. And if anything, I think that what we've seen in the past 10 months is that the work that mobility functions do within their organization is more important than ever. We are the experts when it comes to cross-border relocation and tax and compliance. And I personally believe that, corporations across the world are going to see that if they don't have a mobility professional already, that they need to hire one immediately.
Okay, I think we might get into that a bit more later, but what I'd like to do is just find out a little bit about Twitter, actually. But actually, before we do, thinking about it, we haven't had a fun fact for a while, so let's do some fun facts. Okay, let's do some Twitter fun facts, and I've got some. I expect you'll know the answer to these, Ray, but we'll just try them. We'll try them on the audience too. Okay, who sent the first ever tweet?
Do we want to give the audience a second to answer, or do you want me to answer?
Yeah, I'll go through the other parts of the question then to give you a chance to think about it and see if the audience. Unfortunately, there's always a time delay between us talking and it appearing on LinkedIn. It's about a minute, so I'll wait for answers. So the question is, who sent the first ever tweet? And for a bonus point, when was it sent? And for a double bonus point, what did it say? Okay, so we haven't any answers yet, but in the interest of time, Ray, I'll just start you on the first one. Who do you think sent the first ever tweet?
Jack Dorsey, Twitter's CEO, sent the very first tweet.
You win. You did your induction course. Okay, and we've got that. Eric Tate, Jack Dorsey, Richard. I can't pronounce your surname. Parazinski, Jack Dorsey, Drew Richard, JD, of course, Jack. Okay, not Trump. No, not sure what Trump's next tweet's going to be, but we said we wouldn't do politics. So anyway, but in terms of when it was done, I'll tell you that. Oh no, someone's.
Oh, I think I know too.
Richard knows the answer. He's put 21st of March, 06, and he's right.
That's cool.
And the tweet was just setting up my Twitter.
Yeah, TWTTR.
Absolutely. And then it wasn't until about a year and a half later that the hashtag was invented. And that was invented by a guy called Chris Messina. And he apparently pitched the idea to Twitter, who thought it was a bit nerdy. But obviously they came on board with it afterwards. Some other Twitter facts just to share. Apparently there's 6,000 tweets every second of the day. And on a daily basis, a day's worth of tweets would fill up a 10 million page book if you wrote them into a book. And here's the other fun fact I'll give you on this, which is that it took 3 years, 2 months, and 1 day to go from that first tweet to the 1 billionth tweet. So that is a business. But anyway, we've talked about Twitter, and I won't make any jokes about the number of characters or that sort of stuff. Tell me about mobility at Twitter. What's it like? Tell me about your team and the program and how many moves you do and the types of moves. Tell me all about it.
Yeah, great question. So for those that don't know, I'm still fairly new to Twitter. I joined on December 7th, so it hasn't even been 2 months yet. And I'm still trying to find my sea legs. I definitely jumped into the deep end. But some things, that I can share about our program. Obviously, we're a global program. Twitter is based in San Francisco, California, but we have offices in over 30 cities across the world. We have our global offices are in Singapore and in London. We have offices in Dubai. And so our program is a mix of lump sum and capped moves. And then I would say we move about 200 to 300 employees a year. So probably not as many as you would think. And that might have a little bit to do with our remote work policy and our company culture. But we do have a very large foreign national population. We support over 1,000 tweeps, which are what we call our Twitter employees globally throughout their immigration journey. My team is 5 of us, including myself. I have 3 mobility specialists who sit in San Francisco, and then we have an on-site immigration paralegal with our current counsel.
And you look after 1,000 people who are the new hires, as well as the couple of hundred moves.
Yeah, we support both new hires and transfers, and my team is responsible for relocation, immigration, expat tax. We also provide support in partnership with our flexible work team when employees ask to move to different countries. So yeah, our team is very busy.
Okay. And business travel, does that fall within you, or is that separate?
Yeah, it actually does. Our team manages business travelers as well. And this past year, we stood up a extended business traveler policy that we partnered with our external tax provider.
Okay. And you said you've got you have quite a lot of lump sum policies as well. Is that?
Yeah, we have a lot of new grads right out of college, and so they predominantly make up our lump sum population, and then we have some capped moves. And then as you move, down the pyramid at our company, or up the pyramid, we have more customizable moves where we create customized packages for those at like a senior manager, director, VP level.
Okay, and a question has come in, and I don't know to what extent you're free to talk about internal stuff, but what is the average duration of stay in the foreign country for an expat? Yeah,
so I'll tell you that we have a very small expat population. I don't necessarily think that we have utilized it to its best ability in the past, but from what I've seen, 2 years is typical for an expat assignment.
Okay. And other questions that are coming in, here's one from Mena. With the cost-conscious environment, I believe that the companies are mobilizing the employees from the high-cost countries to low-cost countries. How do you see it challenged from a talent mobility perspective? I mean, are you doing that? Are you moving people from high-cost to low-cost countries?
No, not necessarily. I think our company culture is that we want to be flexible and allow employees to work where they're going to be not only their best self, but able to do their best work. But yeah, I mean, if an employee wants to personally move, from San Francisco to the cornfields of Iowa, we might localize their pay or adjust their pay for their new location. But to answer that question, I think from a talent mobility perspective, historically we've always seen people moving people to jobs, and I think we're going to see a shift of moving jobs to people. And so I would say that to answer Mina's question, I think that's where we'll see the biggest kind of paradigm shift is, maybe jobs that once had to be done in a certain city, they might move that function to where the talent is to avoid having to have them relocate.
Well, I suppose you're a living example of that yourself, aren't you? I mean, your job's been moved to you. You didn't move to your job.
Yep, that's correct.
Yeah. So you're living the dream. And a question here from Jamie Doyle: are you seeing more employee requested moves due to remote working?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, and I think most mobility professionals will agree that if the company is providing the flexibility, that employees are requesting to move, whether to move to be closer to family or to move to a lower cost geography. I've definitely seen an increase not only at Twitter but also at my prior company. And I think that is going to continue, especially if a company can accommodate an employee's request to work in a certain location. But I'd also add, though, that those personal self-driven moves, we're not providing any relocation assistance. And I think that would be in line with industry standard. If you're raising your hand and volunteering to move, you'd usually move at your own cost.
Okay, we're getting hundreds, I might exaggerate slightly, dozens of questions coming in. One thing I want to talk about before we get on to some of these questions is your company, or your CEO, is famous for making a statement about work from home and saying that, the work from home, I think he said could be forever, that nobody ever has to go back to the office if they don't want to. Can you just tell us a bit about your remote working, work from home, work from anywhere, call it what you will. I know work from anywhere is probably a little bit controversial, but what is the Twitter policy now, if you can tell us about it, on remote working, and how do you see that developing?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, I think Twitter was fast out of the gate to announce that they were going to support work from home and remote work. And I think a lot of other Bay Area tech companies were fast to follow. This is an evolving program at Twitter, and Global Mobility is actually not managing this flexible work, remote work program. We are a key stakeholder, and we provide immigration assessments for employees that request to work in another country. But we are not managing the program. I would say that distributed workforce is going to likely be the future, and we're going to continue to see employers try to find ways to meet employees where they want to be. Specifically, what I would say from a thought leadership perspective is that if companies want to implement a remote work policy, they're going to need, to put together a great working team and collaborate with other stakeholders, employment, legal, tax, immigration, corporate security, info security, to ensure there's no risks, not only from the employee perspective, but the company perspective. I'd recommend creating some guardrails and thresholds. So what, is your company's risk level with allowing an employee, maybe even from a state to state perspective, to work in another state for up to 30 days? What is the company's thoughts on having someone work outside of the US for a certain amount of days, and being really clear on what the intentions are, and at what point will you localize pay and ensure that they're paying taxes in the proper country.
Yeah, I mean, it's the dream, isn't it? I mean, as I said, you've done it, is that you can work from anywhere, even if anywhere is sort of defined as anywhere within that country or state, is that you can work from home, you can move to a nicer location, you don't have to have that nasty commute through traffic and the expense or public transportation or whatever it is. You can move to a lower cost area. I mean, the dream sounds great, and I think maybe the genie is out of the bottle now with COVID, that we're never going to go back into being in offices, day in, day out. And I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day who said to me that she used to do a 2-hour commute each way every day, and just can't imagine doing that now. So, I mean, that's the good news. But the flip side is that if you're the company, why would you recruit somebody based in San Francisco if you could recruit somebody based in, say, I don't know, Montana or somewhere where the cost of living and salaries are a lot cheaper? Do you think we're going to find companies are actually going to start favoring employees, if they're going remote, who are in cheaper locations? And indeed, I suppose part of that question is, within Twitter, have you been having conversations with your reward teams in terms of what the pay structure should be if people are living in cheaper parts of the country?
Yeah, I definitely think that we're starting to see all companies think about how to localize pay and to pay employees based on where they are. But I honestly don't think that companies are going to give an advantage to candidates who are living in those lower cost geographies. I really would hope that companies are continuing to hire the best talent for the role, regardless of their work authorization status or where they're living. I think to your comment about remote work and working from home, I think it's also important to note that I don't think working from an office is going to go away completely. I know from a Twitter perspective that we're keeping our brick and mortar offices. We've already opened, some of our offices overseas. I think what we're going to see is a hybrid model. There are going to be employees who say, yes, absolutely, they can do their job 100% from home. But there are going to be others who are going to need to be in the office or miss even just the collaboration. And so, I think we're going to start to see this shift from, instead of doing your day-to-day job in an office 40 hours a week, you'll probably do 20, 25 hours a week at home of that independent work. And if you are going to the office, it'll be more for collaboration. And if you live in Montana, you still might need to come to San Francisco for that collaboration. So, we might start to see an increase in business travel, not only domestically, but internationally, to bring people together when it makes sense to have them together.
I'm guessing that Twitter has got a pretty young workforce. That question was actually asked. Somebody asked you a question whether you've got a young workforce. But the way I want to just take that question is that, for people who've been in the industry or in business, in work for a long time, like us and probably most people, in the audience, working from home is relatively easy. But when you're looking at the youngsters, the new kids, the graduates, the interns, it's much harder for them to work from home when, well, first of all, home might be a back bedroom or a bedsit somewhere. It may not be, a nice house or apartment. But secondly, they're the ones that need to learn, to use your phrase, to get their sea legs in work. How do you think Twitter or other companies are going to address this question of, not so much working from home for your generation, but working from home for the freshmen and women?
Yeah, I definitely think that companies are going to have to be really quick in thinking about how do you disseminate cultural information about your company and help make people feel welcomed and able to access all of the resources they need to be successful right out of the gate. And I'm not sure if companies have figured that out yet, but I'll say I feel, Twitter has done a great job of through my onboarding being remote to make me feel welcomed, part of the team, giving me the access to the resources that I need to kind of jump right in. But I also think that companies are going to have to start being more flexible with, standard working hours and understanding that, employees might work better at certain times of the day and really allowing and encouraging, the employee to really be in the driver's seat of how and when they're going to work versus, sitting at a desk in, at their kitchen table or in their office from 8 to 5 every day.
Yeah. So remote working is a lot more than just where you are. It's also about flexible working. Question or comment here from Berna Anderson, another top 100 star and another former guest on the show. She says, I agree with Ray, the future will be hybrid. All our surveys show the same. So I think maybe that's the way that people are going. And a question here from Henri. I think Henri is based in France. He says, in general, if you could improve the way global mobility works, what would you do?
Wow, that is a loaded question there, and I think that could go a lot of ways. Personally, what I would say is, if I can improve the way global mobility works, I would create some sort of ecosystem where all of the different vendors can talk and we can automate processes to provide a seamless experience for relocating employees. And then I'd also really encourage corporate mobility professionals to create and foster better working partnerships with their vendors. I think your vendors are super important. They're an extension of your team. And I'd love to see the vendors treated from kind of the same perspective as if they were an employee of the company. So that if your employee is talking to myself or if they're talking to my vendor, they feel that it is one and the same and really that seamless experience.
And what about traditional expat policies? The sort of the full fat tax equalized policy with cost of living adjustments and disturbance allowances, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think they're going to continue or do you think it's going to be much more? I know you do lump sum and there's a lot of people out there that like lump sum. There's a lot of people out there that hate lump sum. But I mean, do you think we're going to see more flexibility or a move towards more cash, or do you think these traditional policies are going to survive? Where do you think policies are going to go? Again, another question for you.
Yeah, I think we're going to see more focus on traditional assignments. Going back to bringing the job to the people, whether that means virtual assignments. I also think that we will see an increase, especially in the U.S., with commuter policies, rotational programs. Where maybe we have someone go to a new site for a site launch or for a very specific project, and then eventually they would go back and perhaps work from their home office. And I personally think that is kind of the future. There are a lot of companies out there who are catering now to lump sums and are providing, digital first experiences to enhance a lump sum transferee's experience. And I don't think that's going away either. I think, there are a lot of considerations from the company. What is your company culture? What is your budget? Do you have buy-in from your stakeholders within your company? Personally, I am a fan of providing services over cash. Unfortunately, I've inherited a lump sum and capped move program, but I would prefer to give benefits and services to the employees because I see the value, especially in cultural training, language training, and some of the other benefits out there.
I've got a very technical question for you, which I'll forgive you if you choose not to answer, but I'll ask it. It's from Stephanie. She says, going back to immigration, how is Twitter approaching risk mitigation re remote work for foreign nationals, i.e. H-1B amendments when employees move out of the MSA?
Yeah, that's a great question, Stephanie. And I'll tell you my opinion. I think that if your employee is going to work outside of the MSA, but they're still, within a 50-mile radius, that you are probably okay with just reposting the LCA with their home office address. If they're moving outside of those parameters, I'm sure that your immigration counsel and all of the immigration practitioners on this call today are going to recommend that you file an amendment with the new location address. People
are loving your responses. Look, we've got this one here, Ray for president. We've only just had a new one. We've got to wait a few years now. But people are loving your comments, especially loving your comments about how you partner with suppliers. That went down a storm with the audience. I'd like to move on to a different subject for the there's so much we could talk about, but I know you're very heavily involved with the Puget Sound Relocation Council. Do you just want to tell us a bit about that and some of the stuff, because you're doing some pretty innovative stuff locally, and tell us a bit about the council. Who are the members? The sorts of companies about your region. A bit about it.
Yeah. So Puget Sound Relocation Council is our local relocation council here in Seattle, Washington. I'm fortunate and honored to be the president of PSRC. We just elected a new board that went into effect this January. Our members and sponsors are suppliers from all over the world. And, if you saw yesterday on LinkedIn or through email, we sent out the president's message, which was a video that I recorded to really ensure that our members understood our intentions for 2021. And I could just quickly let you know, in 2021, we're really doubling down on our charitable donations and providing a digital first experience. We really want to embrace technology. As we know, all of our members are still working from home. And so you're going to see a lot more, I think, thoughtful and diverse content coming across all of our platforms, whether that be our Facebook page or LinkedIn. We're hoping to give our sponsors some takeover opportunities with our Instagram page. And then, we are, from my perspective, I'm really interested in D&I. I'm a D&I advocate. Our entire board is going to be going through unconscious bias training to prepare us for a new opportunity that we have with a local organization, iUrban Teen, which is a STEM and arts education program that brings together underrepresented teens and young adults for career exploration and mentoring. And so this year we will be implementing not only an internship for one of the iUrban Teen members to come and learn how to be part of a nonprofit board, but we'll also be rolling out a mentorship program so that our members can help mentor these teens as part of the program. And so I'm excited for the year to come. We're hopeful that we'll have an in-person meeting this summer, but until then, we are dedicated to providing really great virtual content to our members.
Okay, so anybody who's listening or watching who's in the region, then if you're not a member already, then please do join. I'm sure Ray would love to have some more members and people take part. And also, you said suppliers can join too. I think you said.
Yeah, suppliers can join. Most suppliers are our sponsors, and the majority of our members are suppliers as well. We have some great corporate participation. I see Vinny here today. Vinny is one of our great corporate members. But a lot of great opportunities. We have a new sponsorship level this year for $500. And if you're interested in learning how to become a sponsor, you can reach out to Barry Mahaney with John L. Scott, and I'm sure he'd be happy to sign you up.
Okay. And you mentioned diversity and inclusion, and we should do, in fact, we will do at some point a whole show on the subject. This is such a big issue. But just tell us a bit more about it, about especially the problems people face going on assignment. I know that's something that's dear to your heart, and I know you wrote a paper on it, I believe, back in the day.
Yeah, D&I, like I said, I'm a D&I advocate. I've spoken on some panels with D&I as the topic, but from an assignment perspective, I'm very passionate about ensuring that companies are preparing LGBTQ employees for assignments, especially to high-risk countries where being gay could still be considered a crime punishable by death. A lot of countries also do not recognize same-sex couples for immigration purposes, and so ensuring that your company is set up and prepared to have those conversations and throughout the process to ensure that there are no surprises for your assignees. But also, providing cultural training for the receiving manager. If you're sending someone from the U.S. to Japan, making sure that they understand the cultural norms that might come with, moving an LGBTQ assignee to a country where maybe being gay is not as culturally acceptable. For those in the audience who are curious, like, how do I even get started with incorporating D&I into my program? It can be as simple as tracking metrics related to gender and race, and it could be even more complicated from a talent mobility strategy perspective, ensuring that you have a diverse slate of candidates when you're interviewing, that there's no hidden bias in your hiring practices. For me, I'm very big on making sure that our policies are gender neutral and that we are very mindful of that. But one thing I'll also say for suppliers is I think be ready if you haven't already seen companies pushing back on what your company's D&I strategy is. I know for us here at Twitter, we want to partner with companies that are on a similar journey. We know that everyone's not on the same journey, but we want you to know that D&I is important to us. So you should expect to see D&I questions come over on our RFPs. And I'm expecting to see that as an increase in trend this year.
And when you say D&I, you're talking about it in all its many guises.
Yes. Diversity, inclusion, belonging.
Yeah. Okay. Well, all credit to Twitter. The sort of stuff you're doing is amazing. We've only got a couple of minutes left, but I'm just going to put you on the spot for the last minute. What are your predictions for the next couple of years? What do you think? Where do you think we're going?
Yeah, I think we've talked about it a little bit. I think we're going to see changes in the traditional use of the office. I think the office will be used more for collaboration, like we talked about. I think companies are going to start rolling out more inclusive benefits to account for the employee that will be working remote. Personally, my home has become not only my office, but it's become my coffee shop, my restaurant, my gym. And so I think we'll see wellness benefits being more incorporated into either the company benefits or in the mobility offerings. And then I think from a temp housing perspective, we're going to see companies or employees ask for larger temp housing units. So instead of a traditional 1-bedroom, 1-bath, they might want a 2-bedroom to accommodate an office within their temp housing, or an area for homeschooling if their children aren't able to go back to school in person. And then, again, I think we'll see an increase in untraditional assignments and an increase in commuter and rotational programs, as well as virtual assignments. And so I'll be excited to see how mobility professionals rise to the occasion to support some of the demands that the business will have coming.
Okay. Ray, it's been an absolute delight. I knew it would be. You're such a great guy, but it's been such a delight having you on the show. And I think, the audience numbers have been amazing. We had well over 300 people live, and that's probably going to be about 5,000 people during the course of the week watching on catch up. So, fabulous, honor for me to have you on the show. Let me just bring back our two regular heroes, Julia and Pat. Julia, your update on the US was so timely and so helpful, and people loved it. And Pat, your update as ever was so helpful, and you've certainly got people looking at their sort of on Google or their atlases and looking at where in Italy they're going to move to. you're starting a whole new trend. We may find that we're going to be doing this whole show next week in Italian or something. But anyway, all that means is for me to say to thank all you guys, to thank all the audience. The codes are up there for those of you who want the credits. So thank you, everybody. And we're back next week with Benevo Bites, and we're talking about Indian domestic transfers. So thank you, everybody, and goodbye from me, and goodbye from Ray, Julia, and Pat.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, guys.